right. We have some folks joining us. Welcome. It gives me no short amount of pleasure to be able to introduce our feature panelist today and our speaker. She, as I mentioned, is one of the icons on campus, someone I have the honor of working with, the one and only Assistant Dean of MBA Admissions and Financial Aid, Kirsten Moss. So, Kirsten, if you'd like to introduce yourself and maybe any reflections on the week.
Well, Will, I must say that's one of the nicest welcomes I've had in a long, long time. So thank you. I'm just feeding off your wonderful optimism. And I can't believe it's 22. I think that's right, right? Will, 22 events. And really, it's funny because we have been planning this event for quite a long time. And you're so busy in the weeds thinking about what's to come, you don't get a chance to sit back and ask yourself what will it feel like. So it's been wonderful today to just sit in the emotions of the week. And I think the top one for me is just a sense of inspiration right now. And it's inspiration to be with everyone who's online for coming along this journey with us. It's to be working with you, Will, and the rest of the community on this team. I know we've had students and alumni and faculty and staff all come together to really talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, an important issue. And over the last really 6 months with what's been happening in our world, to see 1 week in time where we can take baby steps to talk about difficult issues has been something that has filled me up. How about you, Will? What are your reflections on the week?
I feel overwhelmed with gratitude, I would
Mm,
say, just being able to share space with our students and just how open they were with their experiences, things to think about, kind of eat their fears and hopes. Inspired by sessions with like earlier, we had one with Lori McKenzie and Sarah Sewell talking about not just the direction of DEI at Stanford, but also like ways that we can incorporate it into our everyday lives. So just knowing that I'm surrounded by people who really care
mm,
is just so invigorating.
great.
And this is already a job that I love. Like I am an admissions nerd, but to know I get to work with people that are
So
also kind of
true.
nerds about the things that they love, it's just it's amazing.
That's great. That reminds me, or it echoes for me in the opening, having Dean John Levin, come and talk about why this work matters to him. And knowing that he's really leading the ship at the GSB, and to hear so authentically about not only how it impacts our institution, but the rest of the world, that
Mm.
gave me such, his values aligned with so much that you and I talk about and work towards. So to see him speak at that level really empowered me to continue doing this work. It's like the North Star of the school in some ways. And I know for us this year in admissions, it's our number one priority is increasing DEI in our community. So it was great to see him speak so much from the heart about it.
Yeah, and earlier even Sarah was talking about Sarah and Lori were mentioning how big changes can happen from small actions, and it's the things in the here and now that we do that can have some pretty amazing ripple effects. So um,
It's awesome.
it kind of feels like we were just together on the last office hours, but
Yeah.
so much has happened since August. So I wanted to check in just so we could share with folks who are tuning in, some of you who may have been part of our
Yeah.
last edition of this,
Hmm.
some of the new things that have happened. So maybe to kick us off, could you talk to us about the Bold Fellows Fund that was just announced in August?
Absolutely.
Want to be able to like really highlight some of the things that are happening here.
Yeah. And I want to make sure I say one more thing too, because the most recent thing that just happened was this week. And this has been an event, so diversity and leadership for many years, but it has never been so comprehensive, involving so many people. And I wanted to speak to why it was important to me, if that's all right for a
Yeah.
moment. And when we designed this event, and Will gets a lot of the credit, what's most important to me in serving as the dean of admission is I believe everyone out there. I'm looking. We have 135 people in the audience right now. Everyone has potential within them, and it's our job as admissions officers to help, whether you apply to Stanford or not. It's really to help you embrace that and realize that. And part of what we believe in this program is individuals can't really, we talk about dreams at Stanford, that we're a place where dreams can come true. So we all hold them inside our hearts, but they don't become realized until we can visualize how to make it possible. And this week, at least why it was important to me, is trying to bring so many parts of our community together. So no matter who you are in the audience and how you see yourself and your identity, there are people here at Stanford who we hope that you could see yourselves in. And people here at Stanford are already beginning to take those first steps towards those dreams. So if you can begin to visualize, what's the legacy I want to leave, legacy I want to leave, what are the problems I want to solve, and then begin to see yourselves and some of the role models here. That was really our hope and our goal. So hopefully some of you throughout this week have gotten one step closer to letting those dreams not just be something you could obtain, but to make it real of what you're going to obtain. So does that resonate with you, Will?
So much, because that really was the heart of everything. And it's not just, this week wasn't about admissions as much as it was, how can we help people like think big and see themselves, in business school, in business. What are some of the ways we can continue to grow, even if you don't go to business school? And if you do want to go, like, how can we help you put your best foot forward? Regardless of where that is. So that was just
true.
The heart of everything that this week is about.
And I think of all the literally hundreds of students and others who have been involved in having panels and being able to take your questions and faculty. It's hopefully that was realized. So let's go back to BOLD, what you talked about first. So we're launching the BOLD Fellows Fund. I think our John Levin announced this just a couple months ago. And what is that about? And why is it so important to us right now? We have been proud at Stanford for many years about our financial aid model, which is really a need-based financial aid model. And that means we want to make sure no matter what your financial situation is, that you can come to the Stanford GSB and not graduate with unreasonable amounts of debt. So we really base our package on you as an individual. That being said, we know that many students have put away their savings, especially if you're first gen or you're coming from a lower economic status. You may be saving right now, like our Fly Club talked about. You may be saving not only for this moment in time, but also for the future to help others in your family or larger community. So this BOLD Fellows is really for you, and you can apply for it once you're admitted. And what we do is not only look at your financial situation, but also that greater financial picture with your parents and greater family included, so that we can help give a little bit extra to ensure that you have that protection over time to face whatever financial challenges might be in the future for both you and your family. What would you, and actually Will has helped create this, so I'm going to toss it to you and say, did I miss anything on that?
I think it really speaks to kind of the spirit of what we do in admissions and financial aid. Like in the application process, we talk a lot about the holistic review, but like this is our ability to translate that into the financial aid world as well, knowing like there are holistic parts of who you are that might also need support to and through the GSB. Finances is one of them. And how can we be as thoughtful and inclusive as possible, knowing that, we're still learning, we're still growing, we're still evolving, and we'll always keep changing based on feedback. Feedback is a gift. I'm so excited for it this year. So.
And I have to say too, our alumni, we've been sharing this idea with our alumni who are really excited to contribute to the effort. And part of where it comes from for me too is having really tough conversations once a student's been admitted, even, and I'm sure this has come up in the week, our financial aid packages are generous on average, about $40,000 or $80,000 over the 2 years. Even with that package, just having insecurity about, can I invest in myself and maybe take some of the resources that I've saved that my family might need? And those can be difficult. So this is the program that we've come up to really help with that pain point.
Yeah. I know that there have been some pretty tough conversations recently. So I'm glad we're like, again, every step forward is a step forward.
Awesome.
Speaking of kind of steps forward, we've also taken a step forward with our class profile. So we brought in a class, so much joy.
During a pandemic, it was very exciting.
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about that in a little bit. But I also wanted to have you share a little bit about our approach
Mm.
to the class profile and how we're reporting like who our community is with the public.
Yeah, we wanted, in the last couple of years, we've been talking about how to make sure for our applicants who are applying, they could really understand the richness of the community at the GSB. And we have published in the past what our underrepresented minority figures are as a percentage of our entire class. So that would be looking at Asians, Hispanics, Black students, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, etc., together. But we've never broken them apart individually. This year was, and I said this has taken, we've really had an effort, I think, for the past 3 years and even prior to that, but the Bunsen burner's been going up a little bit more and more energy. I was really excited to share that our profile this year has moved from, I think last year was about 27% underrepresented minorities to 37, which is a huge movement of the needle in a year. And it really represents a lot of outreach effort that we've been doing on the team, leveraging our students and others in the community to reach out and encourage more people to apply, as well as helping students who are enrolled think about the process and whether they could be at home here. So first big news for us was we continue to have a much more diverse class. But then within that, what does that 37% mean? How can we be more clear about that? And it sounds easy that you could just break this out by different identity groups, ethnicities, and races, for instance. But as Will and I continued to look at the profile of our class, we saw that a great number of our students identify in multi-ethnicities and identities, and it's very hard to put one person in any individual bucket. So we really came up with multiple ways to show the class, both from a sense of how the federal government regulations look at ethnicities, but also how we as the GSB do, which is really from a multi-ethnic lens. So Will, I'm going to pass it to, look at you, you've got a slide. I love that. Will helped
I
us with
came
this
ready.
visual. You're so good. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so I think one of the parts about this that was so meaningful for me, like I always talk to people about like who are you? Like what are the different elements of kind of your identity, your lived experience that shape the way you move through the world? Like if you've gone to any of my info sessions, like you're gonna hear that. And the way that we've used to report by federal guidelines, we weren't able to capture some of that complexity, especially as it comes to the identities of folks with mixed or multiracial backgrounds. And so, with the genius help of some of the folks in our central marketing and communications department, like we were able to come up with a visual that both acknowledges the separate kind of components of identity, as well as the experience and identity of being mixed or multiracial in and of itself. And I
Mhm.
know this is a conversation, Kirsten, both you and I have had with students and also like on the road with folks who are curious to see like what does how does this shape into the experience, because we often hear like here is the Black Business Student Association, here is the Asian Business Student Association, but what if I identify with more than one? And I think this
Mhm.
also speaks to kind of a lot of what's going on campus when folks are talking about intersectionality, when they are working across and building coalitions. It's kind of identity is complex, and this is our way to try and embrace and talk about it. So really proud
Yeah.
about it, and that's why I was like,
I
we got to
love
share the
magic there.
slides.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Will. And it also makes us more accountable. We've said as
Mm,
a school that this is a priority for us to continue to build the diversity of our student body. And here's, our first steps to making sure that happens.
yeah, and I know that was definitely one of those big developments for us. Um,
Yeah.
and like biggest development, and this is where I think we really transition into some of the things that folks on this call might be interested in, is
Mhm.
thinking about like our role in admissions this year has thrown so many curveballs our way. um, there have been some beautiful silver linings, like 37% students of color,
Mhm.
but can you talk to us a little bit more about the class? Like we brought in a class that is no small feat. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what happened? How did we get here? I know our last
Yeah.
office hours, we were in the midst of it, so we couldn't really share much, but now any insights you can provide?
Yes, I love how you termed it, Will, that we brought in a class. There were times this year when on the admissions teams, we were not sure that we would be able to do that of any size. And my hat goes off to many of the folks who were applying last year and are currently students. And for you, and many of you may be in the admissions process now, one of the key issues was really the uncertainty that not only Will and I felt, because we weren't sure, how we could make decisions when students couldn't get tests, or whether our international students would get visas, or even whether recommenders could get the recommendations in time. And everything that we were struggling with on the other side, you as an applicant were also struggling with. So I think the biggest lesson that we learned together as a team, and Will, you can add your 2 cents too, was Stanford is all about coming together and caring about the individual and trying to make sure that our decisions have integrity, but also really put you as a student or an applicant at the heart of those decisions. So for us, many of the things we did, schools did different things across the globe, really, but ours were very focused on how do we make sure we can help our applicants know as much as they can, our process can have that integrity, and that we take your needs into consideration. So we ended up, some of the decisions we made, for instance, is anyone who was an international student who didn't have a visa come mid-July. That was right before school was starting. All the embassies were closed around the globe. We offered them an opportunity to have a deferral for the next year. We also work with students, many students, I shouldn't say many, but some with COVID had health issues, or family members who had health issues. So really working one by one with them to figure out what was going to be the best solution given the circumstances. And then there was, for all the students who did want to come, we had so much uncertainty throughout the summer of what would the experience look like. And I know if you're thinking about applying this year, you'll be facing some of those, because COVID is still here, some of those same uncertainties. So our approach really was fireside chats with the students and giving as much information as we could. To be honest, have been really humbled by the experience, because you can't control a pandemic. And at every moment we tried to be as really have integrity and truth and be authentic about what we do know, but a great hope that the fall would, know that we would be able to have at least hybrid classes where students could spend lots of time together. And that hasn't been the case. And we don't know what next year will look like. So I'm humbled by just how difficult it is to want to be optimistic, but also want to be clear and let students make good decisions, given what their position is at any moment in time.
Yeah, and like how many how many calls do you think, or fireside
Yeah,
chats do you think you did this summer?
we did quite a few, yes, for sure. I think Kirsten, who runs enrollment, said she had over 170 one-on-one calls with students out of a class of 400 who really wanted to think through, whether this was the right time and the right approach to school. So that's another example. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because that approach, like even in our info session, we talk about it all starts with you,
Mhm.
and it is an investment in you, and we operate in that same way. Like, how can we keep you at the center? So, just really appreciate how you've involved students in the process, both kind of prospective students and our current students. Um, I
Mhm.
really appreciated how you got feedback from students on both Bold as well as in the process as we were designing the new class profile and the types of information we were able to share, getting feedback and actually acting on it, and whether or not we were able to adopt it, like going through the honest steps of exploration. I just want to acknowledge and thank you for that, because I think that's really important, um, and just speaks to, again, like the community and how we're taking accountability for this.
Well, thank you, Will. Thank you very much.
And so, stemming from the COVID question, I know
Mhm.
it's on a lot of people's minds. So I thought it would be helpful to hear from you. But like, given deferrals and some of the decisions folks have been making for the next steps, like how is that going to impact, or how might it impact future classes? Will it?
Great, great question. And our class last year, we had the biggest class ever. So I'll start there, that we admitted, and it was about 20 students more than the class before, so about 5% bigger. And given that we had deferrals, we allowed our international students to take deferrals for their visas. Um, we are still, if I had to guess, we haven't set our class size at this point exactly, but I'm guessing we will keep that size. It may not be forever, but at least for another year that will be up at least those 20 students again. One of the reasons for that is when we decided to give deferrals, it was this moment in time where you want to make sure that the future applicants, so those on the calls today, would still have a good chance to get into Stanford. You want to make sure that the current students who had already deposited were treated fairly. And then you wanted to make sure those students who might not get a visa had good choices. So we really worked with students to come out with a solution that we thought would be thoughtful for all three of those constituent groups. And what we found from working with the students and doing some surveys about who was interested in deferrals and whether they would take them if their visas didn't come through, it was really a small percentage of the class. So we're feeling that you will have a good opportunity to find a spot at Stanford, and we might be a little bit bigger this year, who knows, maybe 1 year. But we want to make, again, balance between all three of those groups to make sure the process has integrity across the different classes.
Yeah, also major shout out to the students who are helping us gather this information. Like,
huge wave. Yeah, sorry.
It's kind of amazing how even the students were rallying around each other to understand kind of each other's needs, even before they met each other in person or virtually.
Yeah.
So
Many of the international students were calling me saying, "Don't worry, I'm working on such and such. I'm just telling him no matter what, he should come, even if it's a month later and he can't get here on time." It was great. But yeah, we were surprised, even with COVID, how many students from round one, round two, who had deposited, decided that this absolutely, no matter what, we're going to come, even with the difficulties we might face.
Yeah. COVID wasn't the only thing that happened this summer.
Yes.
DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been like the focus of this week, really. And given events from this summer, killing George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, rise of and kind of re-emphasis on social justice on so many of our radars, there have been questions through the week about has this impacted the way we think about admissions? And how can we unpack that a little bit together?
Yeah, and together is a good word because Will and I spend a lot of our free time talking about this together. I've been involved. It's been an honor to be involved with admissions for 2 decades at least. And I would say even the first role I held in my early 30s, that was a long time ago, that was I would say at that time, one of my top priorities, having, whether it's gender, ethnicity. And so it's been a long history for me personally. I must say, though, at this moment in time, the commitment to really ensuring that the diversity of our class matches that of our communities, that energy has exploded. So I don't think it's always been important to me in my admissions work, but especially now it is at the top of the priority list. And it is a real recognition that this country is in a place that feels torn apart. These issues can't stay buried. So not only now is it each individual, but it's us coming together. I feel real change is like a wildfire. You start having sparks, and each of those sparks begin to catch on. And that's how this week has felt, but also how it's feeling at the school. I mean, whether it's our faculty, you'll see Huggy, if anyone stays on for his session next, building new cases around diversity. Every case that is written this year, new case from the dean as part of our racial equity plan, will have an underrepresented minority protagonist. The school, Stanford, just committed to hiring 10 new faculty members whose expertise is within this. And then for us, we continue. Now let's get to the admissions piece of it. Not only is it building community, so individuals can see themselves and believe that this is a place that might help them. So an event like we're doing now, it's also in our admissions process. And we have been doing training for many years on how to think about assessment through a diversity lens. And we're continuing to do that. One thing that I think is important, and I for folks on this call to understand, is assessment is always done within context. So if we look at for excellence or impact, how people have been impacting their communities, and it's really about given the resources that they've had and given the challenges they're facing. So I use this example oftentimes for one student who maybe their parents went to college and their grandparents and their great grandparents For another student, maybe they literally are the first person ever to get there. Now, just getting to college may be the same kind of accomplishment as someone whose fourth generation is to, hold an A average, whatever it is. So that's in context for us. Those are both enormous challenges that people are facing from a very different place. What do you
Yeah.
think about that, Will?
I every site, like basically every application I read, I get this new appreciation of like the holistic review process
Mhm.
and like the way it allows us to understand kind of who people are, what their journeys are, that excellence in context, because excellence is amazing. And for us to really understand what that means for you as an individual, just like that element of context really, I think, speaks to kind of the integrity of our process as well, and our honest open, like, and how much time we do invest in trying to understand. um, so that is definitely admission nerd speaking because to
But
really think about the foundation of our work as something I appreciate, like.
I think it's an important point to make because there are a lot of myths out there that there's only one way to succeed
Mm,
or one level of excellence, however that's defined. And like we look, for instance, in our application for folks who are persistent, who have grit, who overcome challenges. And the myth I'd like to break is for each of you to ask yourself, what is something that you've worked hard for and why was that meaningful to you? And that could be that in college you had a job to support your family or your parents or your education. It could be that you're the first person to get to college, again, to use that example. It could be that you're mentoring your siblings or your larger family. These are moments in time where you've made an effort to support others. It doesn't have to be necessarily you were class president or the captain of some team. So when we look at you holistically, we want to understand what was important to you and the actions that you took. And there's no sort of standard for what excellence means in that category.
You talked about, so some of the things of excellence you mentioned, like leadership, and that's actually
Yeah.
your area of
Dive deep.
expertise,
Yeah.
leadership assessment. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's a great skill set and vision to have to like guide us through the process. And so like I actually got asked this question this summer. So Michelle, if you're out there, I am still mulling over this question that you
Uh,
asked me. She asked, how would you define leadership?
mm.
I took a long time to respond to her then. I asked her to email me a couple days like later so I have more time to think about it. I'm not gonna lie, when she emailed me, I left it in my inbox for a couple days because I was still thinking about it. And I continue to change like how I approach and understand that question.
Mm.
I was wondering if we can get a sense from you, given kind of
Yeah.
your kind of experience in the field of leadership. What are some of
Mhm.
your thoughts on how would you define leadership?
For me, the definition, I have a pretty simplistic definition, which I'll share. Um, but it's not just because something's simplistically defined, it doesn't mean it's easy to do. How about that? Well, so I think about a leader is someone who is able to influence others to help
Mm,
them reach a common goal. So that's the simplistic definition. But how does someone do that? And I know here and I've spent a long time thinking about this and studying many different leadership frameworks. And we do in admissions, we're looking as we're reading these applications holistically for evidence of take of leadership behaviors. So of you being able to, I guess, um, of you helping others achieve this a common goal through your own influence. There's different domains of leadership that help with that, and not everybody kind of spikes. I'll use that word, spikes across all domains. We often look for candidates who may do one of these, work within one of these domains as a favorite or one that really motivates them. One of the first ones that we think about in admissions is really it's how you think, the insights you have. And oftentimes I think applicants believe, oh, it's just my test scores or it's my GPA. In fact, for Stanford, that couldn't be farther from that truth. We really are trying to find evidence in your application of have you have you had an insight or seen a problem that you solved in a way that has helped your team shifted the direction that they might go. How have you used your thinking so that others could come together and get to a place which you've identified as the right direction? So that would be an example of the thinking part. You also see leadership. There's a couple different domains. I talked about this persistence and grit and challenge. That's another place. We're looking for people who are willing to take risks and then work really hard, set high goals for themselves. For some, it could be, it could be being the first to go to college. For someone else, it could be winning a swimming event or a marathon. For others, it could be, playing a piano concerto better than they've ever played it. But we're looking for that evidence that you're working really hard for something that you care about. And now, Will, there's two other domains I could touch on. Do you think it would be helpful? Because I could geek out on this
Oh, totally.
forever.
I'm geeking out listening to you. But before
Right.
we go on, I just
Yeah,
have
yeah.
one comment. So are you saying
Sure.
that there is a diversity in leadership?
Yes, there is. There
Sorry,
is.
had to get that in there. But yeah, I would love
Exactly.
if you can keep telling us a little bit more about those other
Yeah.
domains.
Because that's a great word to use, because within each of these domains, you could demonstrate it in so many different ways, depending on what your passions are. One of the third important domains is, how do you engage others? So how do you get them excited about what you're interested in so you can work together? And then the last one, which I think is important for this phone call, is, how do you think about developing others?
Mm.
And it might not just be individual humans, it might even be your cultures. And I find, I know when I was early in my career, okay, a long time ago, it felt like I was one of the only women on Wall Street, and I was often called upon to run recruiting or support our marketing campaigns or help other women who are coming in the firm. And this can be a big load for anybody who feels like they might not be in the majority, they might be in the minority, no matter how that gets defined. And this really translates to investing in helping the organization as a culture grow, as well as helping individuals within that organization. So you might be someone who mentors others at work, who you might be the person who teaches the newest analyst how to do Excel, no matter what it is. You might be the one who's helping your brother learn, helping your brother apply to college. There's so many ways that you could show that you care about developing others. So those are just four of the bigger domains that I think about. And if you put these together, you really can influence folks to join you in achieving great things.
Yeah, and again, I think the theme that I've
Yeah.
been pulling through is like so many different ways, and even in the small moments,
Yes,
in
thank
leveraging
you,
some of those
Will.
relationships and impacting even on that one-on-one
Yes.
level, like
Yes,
you can have some really outsized results from there.
exactly. And we want to know about them. That if that wasn't clear, we want to hear about them. So don't ever take yourself out of the process because you think that your results aren't big, however the world might define big, because that we're not looking for that. We're looking for the impact that you've had on the people that you care about and the organizations that you care about.
On that point about counting yourself out, I know there is a level of intimidation because Stanford,
Mhm.
the the admission rate is low. Like, just gonna name it.
Yeah.
Can what are your thoughts on it? Like, how might someone approach it in that admission process or in the application process in a way that might help alleviate some of those like concerns?
It's a great question. I want to have a thoughtful answer. I think first we we start, and I'll laugh because it's an echo of what we said before. It really starts with you. So if you're thinking that an MBA, so you're beginning on this journey, that you really need not only the learning but the community, as well as a chance to figure out who you are and where you want to go. If all that is compelling to you, and are deciding to embark on this journey, really my best advice would be to look at multiple programs, because they do have very different selectivity rates, and Stanford tends to be one of the ones that's most difficult, and those selectivities actually vary a lot by program. So trying to find programs that you think might fit you, and embracing that as a journey in of itself. When it comes to Stanford in particular, so that makes me feel comfortable saying, you know what, if this is something you're committing to, do your homework and try to have multiple options. And if you continue to be excited about Stanford and are a little worried whether that selectivity rate would prevent you from coming, the best advice I can give you is we've just shared with you what we're really looking for. It's not about a test score or it's not about one GPA. We're looking for reasons to admit you. And I feel like lucky, and I bet Will does as well, that we are at Stanford. We get lots of applicants who have those great test scores and GPAs. So we have the flexibility to really look at who has made contributions to their communities, who could bring us a diverse perspective into the classroom, who is intellectually curious, and is finding new ideas. And those are at the heart, the true heart of our process. So don't take yourself out just because you can't, you think you didn't go to the right college or you're at the right firm or you're in the biggest industry or your test score isn't in the average. Those are not good reasons to opt out. Now, I guess I conclude to say, when you sit back and ask yourself, where have I made a positive contribution that I'm really proud of in the last, since college to now? If you're not coming up with a couple good examples, then maybe Stanford isn't the place for you. But that's what we're going to be most excited about learning is, how, because that's our mission. We want you to go out and not only change your lives, but the lives of others. And hopefully at some point we'll spread that impact around the globe.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about that reflective process, um, and the introspection that you invest into not just the application, like in and of itself, but as
Yeah,
you're thinking about your goals, um, to our essay question, like what matters to you, um,
yeah.
and that question actually is very meaningful for so many different levels. Can you provide insight into like how you think about like the what matters, and like how would you approach like why is that an important question for us?
Great. And I'm gonna I'll say one other thing on the last question and start right there. And I'm betting this resonates with you as well. That at Admit Weekend, and this happens every year, I'll have students come up to me and said, "Oh, I came this close to not applying. I didn't think there was any way I could get in. I came from a community college, or my, GMAT score was this, or I did my GPA that first year at school was terrible, whatever it is." And they're like, "I can't believe that I decided to do it, and I'm here." So just recognize if you are having those feelings of there's no way, the only way to find out is to be courageous and put that application in. Okay, let's get to the what matters most question. This was a question that was here well before I ever took my role, and I am delighted. When I first started this job, I remember I was interviewed and someone said, "Are you going to change that question?" I'm like, "No, it's the best question I could imagine for anyone earlier in their career to be answering." There's lots of research on leadership that shows that by the time you're in your early 20s, your values are set. So the things that you care deeply about are likely not to change very much over the next 40, 50 years. So there's no better time for you to sit back and think, who am I? How did I become this person? What are the values underneath that are important to me and have been driving my behavior? Because not only is it a good time to check on that because those values are stable, but also there's been so much research that the leaders who are making large impact in our world do so through the motivation of what their values are and through their ability to communicate them to others. So as I work as an executive coach with senior level executives, it's the first question I ask them. And sometimes people who are in their 40s and 50s haven't figured this out. So it is a great time for you to really understand who you are and what's important to you so that you have a true North Star to get to at this point in your, at this magical tipping point in your career. Now, when I look at an essay, I'm really trying to find the best essays, I shouldn't say the best, the essays that are often compelling that I'm reading when they come across our desk in the admissions committee is I'm reading about a real person, in all of its complexity. So the more that you try to think about what Will or I might want to read, the less it's really going to be you. There's only one answer of not there's one story, your true story of who you are. It's hard to get to. It's going to be a little work getting there, but that's the story that we want to know about. So the best advice I could give you would be spend some time, trying to jot down what you think is important, and Will's uses too, and then ask yourself why. Why is that important? And try to continue to go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, so that when you finally understand those core values, you can see how it links back in the choices that you've made. But what would you say? That was a lot of talking from me, Will.
I feel very much the same way, and I actually continue to ask myself what matters and why on
Yeah.
like a periodic basis.
Mhm.
Um, and it's actually a really interesting exercise to do. Like, and it's nice because I don't have the pressure of trying to apply somewhere. So I'm able to like
True.
experiment with the way I approach it. So
Yeah.
even for folks who aren't in the thick of applying, I think it could be something interesting to do. And then maybe ask a friend or someone to do it with you and then kind of talk about it
It's
with
a
them.
great idea. Yeah. Sorry,
That
go
might
ahead.
be one way also to like put words to something that just feels you. Because sometimes those parts of
Mhm.
you are hard to articulate because they're you. Um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, and trying to do that I found that to be really helpful in like big decisions in my life, independent of kind of
Mm.
school.
We hear too on our panels from students that they believe one of the most powerful things they've done in their own development was that exercise. They don't necessarily feel at the moment they had to write that essay that it was going to be so powerful, but hopefully it will give you good incentive that later when they reflect, they realize how helpful that was to understand, where they want to go next. Right.
Kind of similar in the vein of like core values. We do have a question from Angelia about
Yeah.
um, Kirsten mentioned that values are set in your early 20s, pretty set for the next 30, 40, 50 years. How does an individual express their values? Does how an individual express their values evolve over time? Like, what are your thoughts on that? That's
Yeah,
actually a really thought-provoking
it
question.
is. It is. And it was funny to hear you say, Will, the same thing, that you reassess and look back. I think the core things that you value will stay the same, but the way that you will find to express them, whether it's in your work, your family, the things you do outside of work, will shift as you grow and mature. But they will be probably your true north guiders that sit underneath it.
Yeah, and there's a range of questions
Mhm.
in the Q&A box. So for folks
Great.
who are tuning in, we are shifting into that direction. Um, a lot of the things that we were talking about have been either industry or academic background agnostic. And
Hmm.
so, what are your thoughts on like for folks who are thinking about applying but don't know, like you mentioned earlier, like I'm not from the top firm, or maybe I'm not from an industry, like quote unquote, I'm from a non-traditional
I
industry.
love
Like,
that.
how do
Yeah.
you think that
Yeah.
contributes to those perspectives contribute to the class?
Oh, that's fantastic. Question. Diversity. We've been talking about many different kinds of diversity, but that and industry in your professional work experience is one of the key components of how we build diversity in the class. So while some of you from traditional industries are worried that you might not stick out because you're from consulting or finance, others from an industry like education or energy may feel also that you're not going to get in because you're from something that's very different. Literally, when we were looking at those files, we're trying to create a conversation in each and every classroom where you can have these dialogues. So you might have someone, it's not only the industry. Well, in the energy and the solar business, I was doing it this way. Well, when I'm selling, when I worked at the NBA, this is what it looked like. That's how you have some dialogue. But it's also, in addition to industry, we look at what your function is. So it's wonderful to have someone in the room who's actually had to sell something, who's had to build something, to have the engineer. We have doctors and lawyers. We have a pastor. We have a professional violinist. So there are many different ways that they can bring their point of view to solving different problems that are in the classroom.
Yeah, and it comes back to that anchoring in yourself and like the perspective you bring. Dean Levin actually opened diversity and leadership. Well, I
Mhm.
kind of stole his thunder because I quoted him, and then because I didn't realize what he was going to talk about. But he spoke about education fundamentally being about
Mhm.
engaging and encountering difference, and how that kind of has you challenge kind of your own worldview. And even if you don't have to accept or agree with everything, like these are different ways for you to continue pushing the boundaries of your understanding. So it's kind of nice how this does come full circle, and how like diversity really is a critical part of both our
Mm.
identity as an institution and how we want to keep evolving over time. So,
I want one other thing since we're talking about applications, though, Will, is another misconception I believe is that you are your industry, if that makes
mm,
sense. That
mm,
somehow, we're reading all the energy or all the education or the healthcare, and that so much of your application is because you have learned about this thing. What I found fascinating over a couple decades is I can read, 15 different people who are doing, say, private equity or, consulting, whatever it is. And the way that they show leadership or the way that they've impacted others varies dramatically. So this industry, it's not as if it's the lens we're looking at you. It's just one of those things that are in your context. But please don't feel that that's what you represent. We're much more interested in what you have done within your organization, and even in the same company, can be dramatically different.
yeah. There's a question here from Hishki, and this is a question that really speaks kind of to a lot of the work I do. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
kind of biased towards this question. What
Yeah.
are some future initiatives that the mission team has in the pipeline and is excited about?
Well, Will, why don't you start with that one then? I'd love to toss it to you.
I'm I'm really excited about not just the expansion of audiences and trying to really help folks see themselves at the GSB, but how can we also leverage
Mm,
the work we do, the reach that we do have, to help
mm,
people put their best foot forward, regardless of what they end up doing. So they might apply somewhere else, they might decide to stay in industry, but in our outreach efforts, can we do some of the things that kind of challenge you to have that audacity to believe in yourself or
love
understand
it.
yourself in like these new ways so that you can
I love
kind of
it.
have that creative confidence to like see something through or try something different. And so while it's not necessarily a tangible singular thing that we're doing, I think it's almost that philosophy that
Mhm.
underpins kind of the spirit. And actually, that was a lot of what I hoped to develop with diversity and leadership this week, to have
Mm,
it
mhm.
not just be about admissions, but are there things that people can take away, whether it is realizations about themselves or maybe small actions they can do in their everyday lives around the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So super thank you for posing that question, Hishki,
Yeah, it's
because
awesome.
this is something that is so meaningful for me, and this is almost like my what matters.
That is great. I love it. Well, and I think it really captures. I'm lighting up because it captures. Like if you think about a presentation, even from the last decade, it's not here are your classes, here's what the clubs are. It's really who are you and what do you want to do? And I think I share Will with you. So I align so closely that our hope is that we're helping you get in touch with what you want to accomplish no matter where you apply. And certainly Stanford may not be a good fit for every individual. So it's great to be in the to be an admissions role where your true purpose is helping people reach their potential, no matter where it's going to be the right place for them. So, so well put, Will. Thank you.
You can tell I get really
I know,
invested in
this
some of
is
these
great.
things. Again,
It's
admission
so
nerd.
Stanford. Yeah, it's awesome.
So this is gonna put you in the hot seat, Kirsten. This
Okay.
is a question from Folu, and again, to everybody out there, your answer is your own and celebrate that. But we're curious for Kristen in the here and now,
Yes.
what matters to you and why?
It's so funny that I didn't even see this question on the list, but I love it. It's very close, Will, to what you said. My whole career, if I could look back and connect the dots, has been about trying to help people essentially know what's important to them and have the courage to step in and expand what they think they're capable of.
Hmm.
And I have been really lucky to not only be doing admissions work, but also had a chance at Stanford for many years to work in the classroom. And of course, we call interpersonal dynamics to help people with their leadership skills. After I left Stanford, before I came back again as dean, I was working in the private sector in at an executive search firm, doing lots of coaching with senior executives. So it's so much a part of who I am. And in this role, it's a wonderful platform to be speaking with applicants who are early in their careers, almost every day about what they want to accomplish and how we could help them get there. And that really is what's most important to me.
Thank you. I know that can often be a really
We're
tough
born, we're
question.
twins.
I know.
Well, I know it's kind of sad.
And it's like hard to answer that question on the
No,
spot.
but
So actually, like, thank you for like
yeah,
embracing that question. Um, and I think that's just something fun to like
it
hear
is.
from the leader of our admissions team, to hear what some of your guiding principles are.
And
Um,
I'll say one more thing about it too. I feel in this role, different than in other times in my career, it's an enormous responsibility,
mm,
because if at the heart you're trying to help people develop, and we have an opportunity to come to a place that Will and I both deeply believe in, making those decisions thoughtfully and trying to do them with fairness and integrity, and trying to bring in so many, as we said, diverse perspectives in class. It's a lot of responsibility to do that right for the institution and do it right for everybody who's on this call, to treat each of you with the dignity and respect you deserve in the process.
yeah. So we are starting to creep up to the top of the hour. If you could have any parting words of wisdom, advice, something that you hope folks can take home with them after today's session, Kirsten, like what
Yeah.
would that be?
Um, the top card is believe in yourself, invest in yourself. It may not be the MBA that's the next step, but challenge your dreaming and your visualization from all of the wonderful stories you've heard about. How will you step into your own power? How will you be brave? Because we need you. The world needs you. So that's my top card. And then the second card, and I'm feeling this much more in the last month as COVID continues, the pandemic continues to heat up, is be thoughtful about, know that this is a difficult time. And for you as an individual right now, think about your current situation, what you're learning, how much you can learn, how, whether it's social justice or it is the pandemic, is affecting, that runway that you have over the next year to 18 months. Because it is a difficult time for everyone. And whether, if you want to come to business school, it's not like it was 2 years ago, but probably it's, your job isn't exactly like that as well. So just take some time to think, for such a big investment, what, given where the world is and the uncertainty, what's right for you? What does that trade-off look like? And hopefully you can get some good advice from mentors around, and folks like us on our team, to help you get a greater clarity about that decision. But at the end of the day, there's no perfect choice.
Thank you for those words,
Yeah.
Kirsten. And so with that, to everybody who has joined us, thank you so much. Over the course of this week, I hope you've been able to not just get a sense for who we are at Stanford, but I hope you're able to also get some insights into the process, and hopefully insights into yourself, as you're able to unpack and untangle all of the different things that make you who you are. I really hope that also provides some of those lenses, for you to really appreciate and understand those around you with empathy, thoughtfulness, and curiosity, because that's the way that we're really going to be able to get out there and solve the world's problems, working together across difference, celebrating that difference, and realizing the potential that diverse perspectives have to offer. So, with that, this is going to be the last time this ball bobblehead will be signing off. I want to thank you again. We have one more event for Diversity in Leadership 2020, Connect with Community. This evening, Professor Huggy Rao will be doing one more case study and featuring a very special guest. So while I'll be behind the scenes, this is going to be my goodbye to you. Hopefully, we'll cross paths again soon. And until then, take care, stay safe, and keep asking yourself what matters to you and why.